Imagine waking up tomorrow to find your grocery bill, car price, and even your iPhone costing 20% more overnight. The same cart of groceries you bought last week for $100, now it's $120. That new Ford truck just got a price hike, and that iPhone upgrade, suddenly it's way out of budget. No, this isn't inflation, it's tariffs. And if Trump's proposed plan goes through, it's about to hit your wallet hard. We're talking about sweeping new tariffs that could reshape the US economy. A 25% tax on all imports from Canada and Mexico, excluding energy resources. A 10% tariff on all Chinese goods, covering everything from electronics to raw materials. And for foreign automakers, a 100% tariff on imported cars. These aren't just numbers, they're price hikes waiting to happen. Every item that crosses the border under these new rules will cost more. And guess who's footing the bill? Not China, not Mexico, not Canada. You. On paper, it sounds like a tough America-first strategy, punishing foreign manufacturers, bringing jobs back home. But here's the kicker. Tariffs aren't just a tax on foreign goods, they're a tax on you. Because when the government slaps tariffs on imports, it's not China, Mexico, or Europe that foots the bill. It's American businesses. And when their costs go up, so do yours. Every product you buy, every service you use, every paycheck you stretch just a little thinner gets squeezed even harder. You think you're punishing China? Think again. You're punishing yourself. A tariff is a tax placed on imported goods. Politicians sell them as a way to punish foreign nations, but here's the truth. Tariffs don't hit other countries nearly as hard as they hit you. Tariffs are taxes imposed on imported goods, primarily serving as a way for governments to generate revenue. According to the World Trade Organization, tariff revenue helps fund public services and infrastructure projects while also influencing global trade dynamics. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection collected $80 billion in tariff revenue in 2023. But here's the catch. Those costs don't come from foreign governments. They come from American businesses, which then pass them down to you, the consumer. Tariffs aren't just an economic policy. They're a tax on American consumers. While politicians claim these taxes target foreign nations, the reality is different. A study by the Peterson Institute for International Economics found that Trump's proposed tariffs could cost the average American middle-class family between $1,200 and $2,600 per year. Trump, however, sees tariffs as more than just an economic tool. He considers them a negotiation weapon, an industry shield, and a funding source for other initiatives. He's even floated the idea of eliminating income tax and replacing it entirely with tariffs. But let's put this into perspective. In 2023, existing tariffs generated $80 billion in revenue, a fraction of the $2.2 trillion collected from individual income taxes. The Tax Foundation estimates that Trump's new tariffs could raise $2 trillion over the next decade, but that projection doesn't account for retaliation from other countries, which would shrink the revenue even further. Here's the bottom line. The numbers don't add up. Tariffs don't pull money from foreign governments. They take it from American businesses and consumers, forcing higher prices on nearly everything. So when politicians claim tariffs will make America richer, ask yourself, if that were true, why are you paying more? Another goal of tariffs: protectionism. Making foreign goods more expensive is supposed to push people to buy American. In theory, this helps US industries. In reality, it backfires. Trump's steel tariffs boosted US steelmakers but hurt automakers, raising car prices for consumers. Tariffs have existed since 1789, once funding the US government before income tax. Back then, America wasn't dependent on global trade. Today, tariffs don't just raise prices, they ignite trade wars. Countries retaliate, US exports take a hit, and businesses struggle. So next time a politician says tariffs will fix everything, ask yourself, if they're meant to hurt China, why is your grocery bill going up? Tariffs sound like a tax on foreign countries, but let's be clear, China isn't paying them. You are. According to the U.S. Trade Representative, when the U.S. imposed tariffs, American businesses pay up front and pass those costs directly to you, the consumer. And this isn't just theory, it's already happened. The Tax Foundation found that Trump's 2018 tariffs on $250 billion worth of Chinese goods cost the average U.S. household an extra $419 per year, with washing machine prices jumping 12%, an extra $86 per unit. But it didn't stop there. Biden's steel and aluminum tariffs raised costs for U.S. automakers, adding hundreds of dollars to car prices and making appliances and even canned goods more expensive. Now, with inflation already driven by supply chain issues and labor shortages, tariffs only make things worse. And here's the real danger: retaliation. After Trump's tariffs, China hit back with tariffs on U.S. soybeans, pork, and airplanes, costing farmers billions and shifting Boeing orders to Airbus. Now, Trump is proposing a 10% tariff on all imports. According to economists, this would mean immediate price hikes on everything from groceries to electronics. So, when politicians say, "We're making China pay," ask yourself, why is your grocery bill higher than ever? Tariffs on Mexico and Canada could drive up costs on essential goods across the U.S. economy. Food prices would surge. Canada is the largest exporter of meat to the U.S., while Mexico supplies 77% of vegetables and Canada another 11% according to the USDA. A 25% tariff would force importers to pass costs onto consumers, making groceries more expensive. Alcohol would also take a hit. In 2022, the U.S. imported $26 billion worth of alcohol from Mexico, with 18% of beer consumed in the U.S. coming from Mexico. Tariffs would make imported beer and spirits significantly pricier. Gas prices could jump by 30 to 40 cents per gallon. Canada and Mexico supply 70% of U.S. crude imports, and according to Gas Buddy, a 25% tariff on these imports would directly impact fuel costs. Canadian Energy could face a lower 10% tariff, but costs would still rise. Buying a new car? Expect to pay more. 22% of all vehicles sold in the US come from Mexico and Canada, and S&P Global estimates that tariffs could increase new car prices by $3,000, hitting both consumers and the auto industry. The bottom line? A 25% tariff on US neighbors wouldn't just hurt trade, it would raise costs on food, fuel, and transportation for millions of Americans. And then there's his Mexico plan. Trump says if Mexico doesn't stop illegal immigration, he'll hit them with a 25% tariff. That means higher prices on avocados, cars, tequila, and medical supplies. Essentially, tariffs as a border wall. Biden, on the other hand, took a more surgical approach compared to Trump's all-out trade war. He imposed a 25% tariff on Chinese steel and aluminum, aiming to protect U.S. metal industries, but it also raised costs for manufacturers. He placed a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, targeting China's auto industry, but at the same time limiting affordable EV options in the U.S. A 50% tariff on semiconductors was designed to slow China's tech dominance, yet it increased costs for U.S. tech companies that depended on Chinese chips. Biden presented his strategy as more calculated and defensive, rather than aggressive. But here's the twist: his administration collected more tariff revenue than Trump's. In fact, over 60% of all tariffs collected since 2018 were under Biden, meaning that despite his campaign rhetoric, he didn't roll back Trump's trade war, he expanded it. Trump's tariffs have the potential to trigger a global trade meltdown. His proposed 10% tax on all imports could crush American consumers, making everything more expensive. Other countries wouldn't just sit back, they'd retaliate with counter tariffs that could cost American companies billions in lost exports. Biden's tariffs were more targeted, but they still raised prices in key industries. If you bought an electric car, a smartphone, or anything made with steel, you felt the impact. Economists argue that both strategies hurt more than they help. Trump's approach is an economic sledgehammer, while Biden's was a scalpel that still cut deep. Either way, tariffs aren't just a policy, they're a bill you're going to pay. Trump's trade war with China had one big goal: cripple China's economy, slash the US trade deficit, and stop China from dominating high-tech industries. On paper, it sounded like a winning strategy. In reality, China adapted, America paid more, and Beijing may have come out even stronger. In 2018, Trump hit China with 25% tariffs on $250 billion worth of goods. The idea? Make Chinese products more expensive, forcing US companies to buy elsewhere, and ultimately reducing America's reliance on Chinese imports. Did it work? Not exactly. Instead of collapsing, China redirected exports to other countries like Mexico and Vietnam. Companies simply shifted supply chains. Chinese manufacturers started shipping parts to other nations, which then exported the finished goods to the US, avoiding the tariffs altogether. And the trade deficit? It barely budged. The US-China trade deficit dropped slightly at first, but total US imports from China rebounded. Americans still needed cheap goods, and businesses still found ways to get them. Trump wanted to cripple China's tech dominance, especially in semiconductors, AI, and telecom. But China didn't back down, it doubled down. Beijing poured billions into self-reliance, accelerating the Made in China 2025 initiative, a plan to make China the global leader in advanced tech. The result? China started producing its own high-tech components, reducing dependence on US suppliers. Case in point, Huawei. In 2019, Trump cut off Huawei from US technology, banning the company from buying American-made semiconductors and software. Everyone assumed Huawei was finished, but in 2023, Huawei shocked the world. It released a 5G smartphone powered by a Chinese-made semiconductor, something the US thought would be impossible for years. So, did Trump's tariffs actually slow China down? Short term, yes. US restrictions made it harder for China to get advanced semiconductors. Some Chinese industries struggled to replace critical US tech components. Long term, no. China accelerated research and development, investing heavily in homegrown innovation. Companies like SMIC, China's top chip maker, started making advanced processors. China is now ahead in industries like electric vehicles, battery tech, and renewable energy. Tariffs were supposed to cripple China. Instead, they forced China to become more self-reliant and, in some areas, even more competitive. While the US made it harder for China to access certain technologies, it also pushed China to innovate faster than ever. So, did the trade war work? Maybe in the short run, but in the long game, China isn't losing. It's catching up. Tariffs aren't a one-way street. If the US slaps tariffs on imports, other countries don't just sit back, they hit back. And when they do, it's American businesses, American workers, and the US economy that take the damage. Trump and Biden have both pushed tariffs as a way to protect American industries. But here's the problem: other nations retaliate with tariffs of their own. That means US products sold overseas become more expensive, leading to fewer sales, job losses, and billions in lost revenue. Case study: steel tariffs and US manufacturing. When the US imposed tariffs on imported steel and aluminum in 2018, the goal was to protect domestic production. But instead of strengthening US manufacturing, these tariffs raised costs across key industries, from auto manufacturing to construction. One of the hardest hit sectors, the US auto industry. Companies like Ford and General Motors reported billions in additional costs due to higher steel prices, forcing them to raise vehicle prices and cut jobs to offset the impact. Small and medium-sized manufacturers also struggled. many relied on imported steel to produce goods like appliances and industrial equipment. The tariffs made these imports prohibitively expensive, leading to factory closures and downsizing. The broader economic fallout was severe. A trade partnership worldwide study found that while steel and aluminum tariffs saved 33,000 industry jobs, they resulted in a net loss of 146,000 jobs across other industries due to higher costs and reduced competitiveness. The lesson: protectionist policies often backfire. The steel tariffs didn't hit foreign exporters. They hurt American manufacturers, raised consumer prices, and eliminated more jobs than they created. Tariffs might sound like a power move, but in a global economy, they start trade wars that America doesn't always win. The more the US taxes imports, the more other countries tax US exports. And when that happens, American businesses and workers end up paying the price. So the real question isn't just, can we afford tariffs? It's, can we afford the retaliation? Tariffs sound great in speeches. They let politicians say, we're standing up to China, or we're bringing jobs back to America. But when you strip away the rhetoric, tariffs rarely work the way politicians promise, and history proves it. Politicians sell tariffs as job savers, but in reality, they often raise prices without actually protecting American workers. Just look at two high-profile tariff failures. Obama's tire tariffs 2009, aimed at protecting US tire manufacturers from cheap Chinese imports. These tariffs raised tire prices by 20%, but instead of saving jobs, American tire manufacturers still shut down plants. Why? Because the real issue wasn't China, it was automation. Machines replaced workers, and tariffs couldn't stop it. Trump's steel tariffs 2018. Trump slapped 25% tariffs on foreign steel to help US steel workers. And yes, steel production did increase slightly, but here's what he didn't mention. American car makers, appliance manufacturers, and construction companies now had to pay more for steel. Ford and GM raised prices, leading to job cuts in other sectors. So why do politicians keep pushing tariffs? Simple. Tariffs make great campaign slogans. They let leaders look tough on trade while avoiding deeper, harder fixes like workforce retraining and investment in automation. They appeal to blue-collar workers even though most job losses in manufacturing aren't because of foreign competition, they're because robots and AI are replacing human workers. And most importantly, they shift blame. Instead of admitting that industries need innovation, politicians can point fingers and say, it's China's fault. If tariffs were the magic fix politicians claim, they would have revived American manufacturing decades ago. Instead, we see the same cycle. Tariffs go up, prices rise, industries adjust, and workers still lose jobs. So next time you hear a politician say, we're protecting American jobs with tariffs, ask yourself, are they protecting jobs or just protecting their own talking points? Tariffs are sold as economic weapons, a way to protect American jobs, punish foreign nations, and make the US stronger. But strip away the political talking points and you'll see tariffs for what they really are: a tax on you. Let's be clear, when tariffs go up, you pay the price. If Trump's proposed 10% tax on all imports goes into effect, expect higher prices on cars, groceries, and electronics. That new iPhone, expect it to cost 20 to 30% more. Grocery bills, imported food prices will rise overnight. Buying a new car, forget about getting a deal, prices will surge. US automakers, tech giants, and retailers will see costs spike. Higher costs mean lower profits, fewer jobs, and stagnated growth. Mexico, Canada, and China won't sit back. They'll impose counter tariffs on US goods. American farmers, automakers, and tech firms will take the hit. Global retaliation could shrink US GDP by $62 billion. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Tariffs don't make the US economy stronger. They make everyday life more expensive. If tariffs actually worked, they would have fixed American manufacturing years ago. Instead, history shows that they've raised prices on consumer goods. triggered trade wars that hurt American businesses, and failed to stop job losses because the real problem isn't foreign competition, it's automation. If the US really wanted to boost manufacturing, it wouldn't just slap taxes on imports. It would invest in automation and AI to make US industries globally competitive, education and workforce training to prepare workers for the jobs of the future, infrastructure improvements to attract and retain manufacturing at home. But instead of long-term solutions, politicians keep selling tariffs as a quick fix, and the only thing they really fix, their own election campaigns. Politicians claim tariffs protect American jobs, but if every price in your life goes up, who's really winning? Are tariffs actually helping the US economy, or are they just a hidden tax on you? Let's debate in the comments.